recommend win for us. And we're going to start off tonight by each one of them picking a ping pong ball with a number on it. And then we'll give them their name tag, and that person will start off the forum tonight. And the way we're going to work it is going to give everybody 10 minutes for an opening statement. And then I'm going to have, I believe we have a bunch of them passed out, and I'd like to start getting them in. And if we don't, if you need some to fill out, they're up here in front for questions. 2 minutes per question, and 1 minute for response, if anybody would like to respond. But the questions that are going to be asked are going to be asked to each one of the 5 candidates to keep it fair. So, Mike?
I won the lottery. I'm out of here. I'm 4.
Mike is number 4. Mark? 2. Lisa?
1.
Lisa's number 1. Justin?
3.
And Andrew is 5.
How do I know that? It was late.
Have a seat. Justin? Mike? Lisa? And Andrew. I'll be anonymous. Hey.
I'll be Mark Greenberg.
Mark Greenberg. Okay.
I'm well, thank you.
Let's see. Mark, who's the number 1, Shirley? Okay. Lisa, start off with your 10 minutes, please.
Sure. Well, thank you all for being here. I know it's a busy week, and I'm sure that you have other things to be doing, and I appreciate that you're here listening to us. And thank you, Dennis, for putting this all on. You know, the real truth is that any one of us at this panel will be much better congressman than Chris Donovan or any of the Democrats that the liberals will put up. So we know that you have some good choices here. But tonight, you get the opportunity to line us up and listen to us, and hopefully you can pick the one that is going to be the best candidate for November. You know, we Republicans are up against the ropes. We have an election that is going to be a battle for the minds and hearts of our country's people. You know, we are being pushed by the liberals, a blatant push to make sure that they're going to threaten the very fabric of our culture and our country. You know, it's bad enough that liberals want to increase taxes and increase government spending. But now they've added $15 trillion of debt on the backs of our children. It's bad enough that they passed Obamacare, and now they want to take away our religious freedoms and mandate our Catholic churches and our charities. It's bad enough that they've let criminals out early from prisons, and now they want to repeal our death penalty. It's bad enough that they refuse to secure our borders, and now they want to have our illegal immigrants have the right to vote. This election is a battle between 2 visions, very different visions. Democrats want to turn our country into an entitlement society, tax and spend and bigger government. I want to keep our economy growing, not our government. I want to make sure America remains a country based on freedom and opportunity, hard work and competition. And I know something about that. I've worked hard all my life to get a good education, to raise my family, and to grow my family of businesses. I know what it's like to meet a payroll and to pay down a bank loan. I know what it's like to deal with overbearing regulations that stifle entrepreneurialism and take away the much needed time for small business owners. I know what it's like to take a personal and a financial risk to start a small business. And I believe those are the things that our country was founded on. I believe we need to send people to Washington with real life experiences, people with common sense, and also the wisdom and the principles, strong principles, that we can push our country in the right direction and take back our country. So I thank you for being here. I look forward to answering your questions and hearing your thoughts and feeling what what Newtown is caring about. So thank you.
And Mark.
Thank you very much, Dennis. I'm sorry that my back is to you, but I feel comfortable speaking in this way. Newtown's a great place to come and to talk. I remember 2 years ago we had a similar forum and debate. It was absolutely the best that we gave, and I really, really credit Dennis and his RTC in giving a tremendous show. To speak to the folks about going down to Washington, who might be the best candidate. My name is Mark Greenberg. I'm 58 years old, and I'm running for Congress to be your congressman in the 5th District. I am the product of the American dream, and I don't make apologies for that. When I was growing up, it was a system, it was a great country where you could get somewhere with your effort, where the opportunity was there. And I was very successful. I've been in business for 37 years in real estate, and I'm proud of what I've done. Now I'm very, very nervous that my children, ages 9, 7, and 5, and 2.5, are not going to be able to have that same opportunity. They're not going to grow up into a system as favorable as the one that I grew up in. And I start to think to myself, I've got to do something about it. I have to make a difference. If you don't do something about it, you're really part of the problem, you're not part of the solution. Now, why is it so bad? How can I make a difference? I believe we have to send people of substance down to Washington, people who have had business, people who have met payroll, people who have written the names on the front of the checks and not on the rear of the checks. We have folks down in Washington who have made a career of being in that job, the business of politics. They get elected time after time to keep that job. It's a wonderful job, wonderful benefits. You have the people calling you Mr. Congressman or Miss Congresswoman. It's intoxicating almost. You go down to Washington and you drink the Kool-Aid. Then you want to stay there forever, literally. And you do whatever it's necessary to stay there forever. You vote according to how you will get reelected, not what's best for your constituents or the state of Connecticut or for the country. What we have to do is we have to stop. We're going down for you, not for them. We have to stop this right away. And what I've done is I've put forth a pledge, and I've signed that pledge. There are 3 things in that pledge that I want to bring to your attention. Number 1, and you've seen this pledge. It's been mailed to you, and you know about it. That's not the pledge, that's something else. But number 1, term limits. I believe we should have term limits of 8 years. Right now, we'd have 4 terms of 2 years. I frankly think we should have two terms of 4 years, so that we're not constantly running for re-election, so that the money is not pervasive in the system all the time, so that the first day after we're elected on the 6th or 7th of November, we're not starting to have those fundraisers to start bringing in the money to start to win again for the next term. Second issue, I will not accept a pension of any kind. We shouldn't go down to Washington for the perks, for the benefits. We should go down because it's our obligation as Americans. So I've said no to a pension. Not going to accept it. Third thing, how could we possibly sign into laws that we exempt ourselves from? Isn't this sending the worst message to the people of this country? That we sign laws which we're exempt from in terms of Obamacare, insider trading. We're exempt from it. We go down to Washington as people of modest means, and we come back after we've drunken the Kool-Aid as rich people. Well, something's wrong with that system. What does that say? It says that these folks go down for themselves. They don't go down for you. We have to change that. We absolutely have to change that. We have to change it now. We can't have the folks in control of committees being in control of those committees simply because they've been there for 20 or 25 or 30 years. We have to have people or in control of the committees who know what they're doing. Wouldn't it be something if the chairman of the finance commissions actually knew what they were doing, as opposed to Barney Frank and Chris Dodd? We know the benefits that they got from being powerful and on that committee. Now, perhaps most important to some of you folks here is, how can I win this district? Well, we have to win the district by going into the cities. We have to go into Danbury, Meriden, Waterbury, Torrington. We simply cannot afford to get 11%, 15%, or 19% from the cities. If we do that, we're going to lose every time. There's not going to be a shot at all that we as conservative Republicans are going to win if we don't go into the cities. The other thing, we can't give up on the union folks. And I've spoken to many of these union folks. They would rather have some job making 80% of what they're getting now than 100% of nothing. They want to have security. They want to have stability. They're willing to work for less if they know that they're going to have a job tomorrow. So let's not give up on the union folks. They are not to be given to the Democrats. Minorities are not to be given to the Democrats. I will go into these cities with my printed Spanish material and explain to these folks why I'm the right candidate for them. And we'll do better than 19% or 20%. We'll get 25, 30, 35%. Will we win in the cities? Probably not. But we'll do awfully well. The other thing I'll tell you about my candidacy is that we will have the resources to go toe-to-toe with Chris Donovan. We've already gone toe-to-toe with him on philosophical ideas. We've asked him to step down from the redistricting committee, and eventually that pressure worked. We've asked him to return $40,000 of lobbyist funds that he's taken into his campaign. So far that hasn't worked because he hasn't given it back. But we'll go toe-to-toe with him on ideas, on philosophies, on our vision for the future, and we'll also go toe-to-toe with him with financial resources. He will not outfund me, he will not outraise me, he will not outspend me, because what is necessary to win will be certain resources which I will then supplement my campaign with. So he will not beat us at that game either. He will not beat us at any game. We will win this election, I promise you all. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Dennis. Hey, Dennis, thanks for putting this on, and also thanks to Mitch Malinsky, who can't be here tonight, but did such a great job last year, kind of started a little bit of a tradition here. I hope you don't mind my back, Mark. And thank you to Bill Landers of Maribor for putting this on. The only question I have for Bill is, who is filming the CNN debate tonight?
Who cares?
Yeah, all right. This will be more exciting, I'm sure. Again, Justin Burney, running for U.S. Congress. You know, I've been to Newtown so many times, and I think there's some trifolds flowing around. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on my background. I do want to talk about, though, the party. I do want to talk about how we're going to win this seat and why it's so important that we nominate the right person. We've got 5 good candidates up here. All of us have different backgrounds. We come with different experiences, and we're on very different ends of the spectrum. Conservative to liberal. Some of us are on one end, some of us on the other, some of us kind of float in between. Not necessarily in this order we're lined up tonight, but we are very different on policy. And why does that matter? I believe it matters very much that our Republican principles, our conservative principles, are represented by our nominee. I recently had the opportunity, we had Lincoln Day, of course, just about a week ago. I read a great book leading up to that called Lincoln for President. It talked about the race in 1860 and about how President Lincoln, then candidate Lincoln, had the issue of slavery in front of him. And the question was, how is he going to handle this issue? It was a very tumultuous issue. It's splitting the country apart. And a lot of his advisors were saying, walk around the issue, thread the needle, don't take it head on, because this is something you don't want to touch. It's a third rail. Well, he didn't take that advice. He leaned into the issue. He had a good stance on it. And he didn't back down when his advisors tried to tell him otherwise. He leaned into it. He said, no more slavery in new territories. And thank goodness he did, because he went on to win the election. I don't think he would have done so, and the historians agree, had he not taken a good stance. Today our biggest issue is what is going to be the size of government? What's going to be its role? And as Republicans in Connecticut, you know, I always hear, well, we're in the minority, we can't win elections. I don't believe it. We may not be the majority party, but we're the majority principles. And the way you win elections isn't by having the biggest voter registration, it's by having the best leadership, by having the best message. But the problem, folks, is that no one's going to believe our message or our messenger if our nominee doesn't have the principles that we as a party have. How can we lead on election day if our nominee doesn't reflect our conservative principles? I believe the way that we're going to win elections in Connecticut is not by running to the left and putting up the most liberal candidate we can find with a false notion, this false theory, that somehow that's what the voters want to see, a liberal Republican, someone that talks and looks and sounds like a Democrat. What has that strategy gotten us? We're shut out. No congressional seats, no Senate seats, no statewide seats. We're in a super minority for the most part in Hartford. It's a losing strategy. And we wonder why we were left behind in the last election in 2010. Well, guess why? Because those other states ran conservative candidates. Look at New Jersey, the bluest of blue states. They ran a conservative, Chris Christie, who's turning around that state right now while we're stuck with Dan Malloy. Look at some of the other races down in Florida, one of the most diverse states in the country. They ran Marco Rubio, who experts a year earlier were saying there's no way Marco Rubio can win because he's a conservative, and a Tea Party conservative at that. Well, he did great on election day, and now he's helping to lead the charge in the Senate. So I would say to you, as we move towards the endorsement on May 18th, think about how we can lead and how we can win, because I don't believe it's moving to the left and running the most liberal candidate. I believe it's by showing daylight between us and the Democrats. Because our principles, our conservative principles, those are the principles of the voters. And if we believe in our principles, if we believe enough in our principles to put up a candidate that reflects those values and principles, we are going to win on election day. But if we're afraid, and we take the easy way out, and we put up a candidate who's only with us 30, 40, maybe on a good day 50% of the time, we're not going to make it. We're going to lose. And 2 years from now, we're going to have the same conversation. How do the rest of the country move forward on election day and Connecticut be left behind? So I'm really happy about the forum tonight. It's all an opportunity to show what some of those differences are so you can make an informed decision. And I really am looking forward to bringing back, helping to play a role, as small or large as that may be, to bring the Republican Party back into Connecticut, and most importantly, sending a conservative to Washington so we can get America back on track. Thank you very much.
Good evening, folks. Thanks for being here tonight as well. We all know that Dennis kind of set this up, but his wife Barbara really set it up in the coffee. So thank you very much for that. For those who don't know, I've been out here a number of times as well. My name is Mike Clark. Until about 6 weeks ago, I was the town council chairman, the first selectman, if you will, or mayor of Farmington. And what I'd like to do tonight is just talk a little bit about my background and what's brought me to this race. And the question you often get asked in front of all the RTCs is, why are you running? What's pushing you to do this? And it's really crystallized, and you know, many of us have been in this for 8, 9 months, and it's crystallized to me. The first and foremost is, I want my country back. I feel in many ways that our country has turned a corner, and it's just not reflecting the country that I was so fortunate to grow up in, and so fortunate to serve as an FBI special agent. 30 years ago, I took an oath as an FBI special agent, and that oath was to serve and protect the Constitution of the United States. And there's really no expiration date on that oath. I feel as strongly today about this nation as I did when I put my hand up and had the other hand on a Bible and proudly took that badge and gun and went to work for the United States of America. But as we approach this election in 2012, it is just shocking to me to see what has happened in Washington and what's happened in Hartford and what's being thrust upon us in our state. Again, I served 6 years as the head of the town council in Farmington, and I felt the mandates that came from Hartford and Washington. Again, like Pat here, and I know Barbara as well, as first elected and chairpersons or mayors, you are forced every year to look at your budgets, to prioritize your budgets, and to spend the money where it needs to be spent. And that's what local government does best. And that's what Republican-led local government does best. Because just like here, Farmington is very similar, Barbara and I talked a little bit, we have to pass referendums in our towns, where you're in touch with the voters every step of the way, and if you're not in touch, it gets pushed right back out, and you have to make changes. And so that's really important. That's a skill set that I want to bring to Washington. You can't do everything for everyone. It's a skill set I've learned for 8 years at United Technologies Corporation as a manager there. It's a skill set I learned as an elected official for 6 years. And it's a tremendous, tremendous importance that we start to prioritize what is important to the people. And what do we want to bring back, from Washington to this state. And I can tell you, it's not more regulations. I'm very fortunate. I'm a corporator for Farmington Bank. Tremendously prosperous, mid-sized bank. Used to be Farmington Savings Bank. Just recently changed. But again, they had thrust upon them this Dodd-Frank legislation. And if you talk to the president of Farmington Bank, that has cost him $1 million to implement this year. Now, how many jobs could John Patrick have created with $1 million? And that's, again, just this year. And it's just outrageous that this legislation, the Farmington Bank needed not a penny of bailouts, needed nothing from Washington. But they got stuck. What they got from Washington is a bill for $1 million. So it's legislation like that that's just unconscionable, that it's being brought and thrust upon us. When you look at the 2012 election, in my eyes, it boils down to 3 key areas. 1 is jobs. 2 is deficit, and I think those 2 are definitely interrelated. Again, I heard Pat talk about refinancing the bonds. Again, when I came to Farmington, we had $72 million in bonded debt. When I'm leaving, we've got $56 million. And I made a commitment with the rest of the Republican town committee, that town council, that we are going to make a difference. We're going to pay that debt down, as painful as it might be. We're going to pay that debt down because your hands are tied when you get debt. There's nowhere to maneuver. And when you're looking at the federal government with $16 trillion in debt, their hands are starting to get tied. And if we don't change in 2012 and get a Republican Senate and a Republican House and a Republican President, we're going to turn a corner and we're not going to be able to come back. It is going to be that significant. Because in 2014, Obamacare will kick in, and you're talking about more deficit and more regulation and less health care, for that matter. What I want to bring forward and what I'm offering to the voters is simply my experience. I had 22 years as an FBI special agent where I served this nation, I served it proudly, and I served it with integrity. So first and foremost, I'm going to bring that integrity to bear in Washington and vote for what I believe are the right things. And many of those things are Republican principles. Secondly, I'm going to bring my years as a United Technologies Corporation employee. I've seen where our jobs are. They're in China, in India, in Indonesia, and spread all over the world. My company is Otis Elevator, a division of UTC, and we don't make a single elevator in the United States of America. Not one. And it was invented here and manufactured here for over 149 years. Not one is made there. And that's a shame. And I've been in China where they are made, in Mexico where they are made. So I want to bring to bear my integrity. I want to bring to bear my skill set that I've learned in private industry. And I want to bring to bear the 6 years as a town council chairman, as an elected official. And I want to present that as this is the skill set that I'm going to bring forward and bring to Washington in the 5th Congressional District Representative. And so I think it's really important. I've sat in your seat for the last 10 years as RTC members, and I've seen people come and people go and talk about what they're going to do. And so it's very important that you look at all the candidates and look at our records. What have we done? Where have we worked? Where have we served? And have we been elected? Because I'm just telling you, there's a skill set to being elected. A definite skill set where you, and again, in this district, you absolutely have to appeal to the 45% of the independent voters. You have to, if you're going to have a shot. You could have every Republican vote for you, and you'll still lose. And again, I've shown that skill set in Farmington. My last election, I won 65% of the vote, and Farmington is very much demographically just like the 5th. So that is what I want to bring to the table. And as I close, I consider this, and as well you should, this is a 12-month job interview. And now, it's your opportunity to look at us and determine who is the person you want to send forward, because we absolutely have to beat Chris Donovan. Because when you look at his record, it's scary, folks. And we send him to Washington with some of the other characters, it's just going to be, we're going to be turning a corner and we're not going to be able to come back. So again, I welcome your questions as we go through this evening. I thank you all for being involved, because again, any elected official will tell you that sometimes it's the people who are lethargic and are ill-informed, who cause the greatest problems because they just don't know what they're talking about and they're not involved. So thank you for being involved. And again, ask any questions and we'll see you later. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andrew Roraback. I live up in Goshen with my wife Kara and our 3-year-old son Andrew. And I guess it's fitting that I should be the last person to rise, because I was the last person to get into this race. I know many of you, but I don't know all of you. But there's one person I want to introduce, and as an elected official, I should be better with names. I want to say Jeff Chase. Do I have it right? Jeff is joining us. He's from the Democratic State Central Committee. And I've gotten to know Jeff because he's been following me around my district and in the Capitol as I do my work as a Republican senator. It doesn't surprise me, because the day before I announced my candidacy for Congress, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee filed a Freedom of Information request with the legislative branch of government. They asked for a copy of every email I've sent in 18 years of service. Actually, truth be told, when I started as a state rep, we didn't have email in 1990. But they asked for a copy of every email I've sent as a legislator, every letter I've written as a legislator, a phone log of every phone call I've placed as a legislator, and a record of all of the trips that I've taken as a legislator, which have been very few. But I guess I was flattered at one level that the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee in Washington thought enough of my candidacy to want to pour through the minutia of 18 years of service in Hartford. Let me tell you, if I may, since this is only my second time to Newtown, other than a few visits to Julia's house and May's child care center next door. I was born in Torrington, brought up in Litchfield. I went to Yale College and the University of Virginia School of Law. After law school, I returned home to Torrington to join my father, brother, and sister in the family practice of law, which was started by my great-grandfather in 1883. I'm the 4th generation of my family to practice law in Torrington, and I'm proud of a family that has had a rich history of public service. I try not to shame their good name in the work that I do. I currently serve as the Senate Republican leader on the Finance Committee in Hartford. It has not been an easy go for us as Republicans with one-party rule in Hartford, and I've had a ringside seat, and I've used every ounce of energy that I have to push back on the largest tax increase in our state's history and on reckless borrowing that has gone out of control. The last time Jeff and I were together, he was filming me as I spoke against borrowing $291 million in exchange for a promise of the creation of 300 jobs, almost $1 million a job for the Jackson Labs proposal in Farmington. I welcome Jackson Labs to Connecticut, but we are spending much too much per job, and we're foregoing a whole bunch of opportunities because of it. Ladies and gentlemen, the approval rating of Congress is at an all-time low, and I'm sorry to say it's with very good reason. We need to change Congress, one congressperson at a time. But as bad as Congress is, the Obama administration is even worse. Our national debt has grown from $10 trillion to $15 trillion in the past 3 years alone. That's $48,000 for every man, woman, and child in this country. Debt that none of us asked for, debt that each of us will be obligated to repay. 42 cents of every dollar spent by the federal government is borrowed money. The free enterprise system is on the ropes because the Obama administration is intent on creating an entitlement society modeled after Greece, Spain, Italy, and Portugal. And none of us have to look very far to see what's in the offing if we don't win the presidency in 2012 and send sensible people to the United States Congress. I am a Republican, make no mistake about it. For 18 years, I've been fighting the good fight for our party in the Connecticut General Assembly. But I'm also proud to say I'm an American before I'm a Republican. I've never thought that partisan advantage should be the end game of political life. I've always believed that the end game ought to be advancing the common good. What we have seen in Washington is a rank abdication of the responsibility of elected officials. The supercommittee is Exhibit A of the failure of Congress. And the failure of the supercommittee is failure exponentialized. I don't run from my political stripe. I am a traditional New England Republican. And in my view, that's the voice that's desperately needed and conspicuous by its absence in the national debate over so many important issues. If Connecticut is to have a Republican member of Congress, in my view, it's the traditional New England Republican who is fiscally conservative, but moderate on social issues, who holds the best hope of winning this seat. I wish Republicans would choose the next member of Congress, but they won't. The people who will choose the next member of Congress are the 45% of the voters in this district who are unaffiliated, and they swing to the Republicans and to the Democrats. In 2008, Barack Obama carried the 5th district with 57% of the vote. In that very same year, I won re-election to my state Senate seat, representing 15 communities in Northwest Connecticut with 65% of the vote against a strong Democratic opponent. For 9 consecutive elections, I've won the confidence and earned the confidence of voters not just in our Republican Party, but voters who are unaffiliated and people that have respected the competence, the character, and the integrity that I bring to my work. Ladies and gentlemen, it's that competence, character, integrity, and experience that I want to bring to work for the people of Newtown and the 40 other towns in this district in Washington, D.C. I know the issues that matter to people. I'm a good listener. Anyone who's an elected official understands that if you're going to serve responsibly, listening skills are important. But I stand ready to hit the ground running to represent your interests and to allow Connecticut to have a voice in the United States Congress that reflects the views of the people who live here. So I'm delighted to be here. I look forward to answering your questions. I look forward to seeing you often as the campaign unfolds. Thank you very much.
Andrew.
Yes.
You get the answer?
Okay, I'm ready.
I believe that most municipal and state pension plans are unsustainable as defined benefit plans and will eventually be changed to defined contribution plans for new employees. However, I strongly believe that our military deserve defined benefit plans. What do you think?
And I'm just more comfortable standing.
Stand up. I prefer you stand up.
Thank you. Let me first address the issue of the sustainability of Connecticut's pension system, because I think the question went both to state and federal pensions. 2 weeks ago, I introduced a bill to change Connecticut's pension system for new hires, for people that would come to work for the state of Connecticut on or after July 1st, 2012. And the bill I proposed, I was working with Senator Mike McLaughlin from Danbury and Senator Jason Welch from Bristol. The three of us introduced this legislation. What we said is that Connecticut has $71 billion in unfunded pension and health post-retirement liabilities. If we can't change the rules for new hires, we have a very bleak future in this state. So the bill that we introduced said for new hires, they would not enjoy a defined benefit plan. Rather, they would be enrolled in a defined contribution plan. And we'd also put an end to this phenomenon of pension padding, which enables people to load up on their overtime in their last 2 years of service, many of them retiring with pensions that are bigger than their base pay. And understand, the bill we proposed would only apply to new hires. The leader of the SEIU, Larry Dorman, told the press, I'm sorry, I've got 30 seconds, that I was out of touch with reality. The governor's office dismissed the idea out of hand. That's where this state's thinking is at. And Chris Donovan is the chief cheerleader for that school of thought. I think people that serve our country in uniform, if there's any community of people that deserves a secure retirement, it's that community of people. And thank you. Sorry. How long do we have to answer the questions? 2 minutes? I'm sorry. Thank you.
Lisa?
Well, I've been in the private sector for over 20 years. And my husband's been in the private sector for over 35 years. And all of our companies, and I think if you added them all up, there's over 70 companies. Not one has a defined benefit pension. They're all defined contribution pensions. I believe we all are equal, and whether you're a congressman or you have served in the military, I believe we all should be on something that's very sustainable. So I do not make exceptions for one group of people to another. I think we should all bite that bullet and make a decision that our government employees and everyone, including congressmen, should have defined contributions. Thank you.
And let's see, Mark.
Yes, thank you. You know, it used to be that you would go into the state because you'd have security and stability, and you'd take a little less for doing that. Now things have turned around. Now if you get a state job, not only are you getting security, stability, and a special pension plan, but you're probably earning 20 to 25% more than the private sector. We have to change that. We have to put things more in line. So I would be in favor of going to a more 401k or a KEO type plan for the state. As well, we should put these salaries in line with the private sector for new hires. With regard to the service people, we have to give them all the benefit that we can for the tremendous service. And if that means more defined benefit plan, then that's fine with me. I think we have not treated our service people properly at all for the great work.
Thank you. Justin?
I want to be real clear on this question because I don't think there's any room for maneuvering. We should not be taking away defined benefit programs from military personnel, period. That's period. And I will vote against that. I will fight against that. Now, I'm glad to see we're finally getting some reform in Hartford. But frankly, this problem's been brewing for quite a long time, so it's overdue. I hope that it's successful this year. But the idea that we're going to balance the budget on the backs of military families, to me, is just morally wrong. We've got people who go overseas. I know service members who've been on 5, 6 tours. We're not talking about an employee of the state who did 20 years at DEP. We're talking about folks that have put their lives on the line for 20 years defending the nation of this country. And I understand that we have a bad budget problem, but that ought to be, frankly, the very last thing that we put on the table. The VA bill in the House of Representatives and the Senate, every single year, is the last appropriations bill passed by Congress. My first order of business when I get to Congress is to pass a law to mandate that the appropriations for the Veterans Administration is the first bill passed by Congress, because they shouldn't be getting the scraps that are left over after the bureaucracies and the bureaucrats have their way at it. So I'll be very clear on that question. Defined benefits belong in the military. Let's make sure we do the reforms in the non-military government that we should have done 20 years ago. Thank you.
Mike.
Again, I know there's quite a few, there's several first selectmen and other town council members out there, and also some finance committee folks out there as well. And when you're involved in government, you see where the real money is. And the real money is in the pension plans and in the medical plans. That's where the real money hits the road, if you will, in town government and in state government and in the federal government. Now, I'm very proud to say that in my last 6 months, we negotiated 3 labor contracts in Farmington. I know that's not my 2 minutes because I just started. So I get 2 minutes and 30 seconds then. But we negotiated 3 labor contracts in Farmington. And I'm very proud to say, Andrew, I know my pond is a little smaller than the pond, and I'm fortunate. I have a 5-2 Republican advantage where I am in Farmington.
Count your blessings.
I do every day. And for every new hire coming in to our unions, they are under a defined contribution plan. And it's a tremendous step forward, because you're talking about long-term security for your town. Now, we have not done that with our fire and our police or our teachers. But it's a start. And with anyone who's been involved in union negotiations, you understand. You have to take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, and you inch forward on this. Because we have something, again, that's been thrust on us from Hartford, which is called arbitration. And so you're constantly fighting that battle. But again, we're very proud that moving forward, every new hire in Farmington is going to be under this plan. As far as the military, I concur 100% with what Justin is saying. Again, Lisa mentioned bite the bullet. Well, someone in the military can take the bullet. And they deserve a different plan than anyone else. They're putting their life on the line. And so again, I would fight to the end to allow them to have this defined benefit plan, because they've earned it in a different way with tremendous sacrifice for our country.
Mike, stand right up there. You get the first question this time.
Perfect.
Please give some details as to how you can influence the other congressmen to pass a law eliminating the exemptions that they enjoy. You mentioned health care and the insider trading.
Isn't it say mark on it?
No, well, it's going to the whole, every customer will go to everyone.
Okay, so how did it end there, Dennis?
Health care and insider trading.
Okay. Again, there's several great books out about the insider trading scandals in Congress, which are truly shocking. I mean, it's an amazing series of events that's occurred down there. And again, the key here is to send more Republicans to Congress. Because again, anyone who can do the numbers, who can crunch the numbers, you can see just, where some of the issues are. And again, we absolutely should not exempt ourselves, congressmen, from the rules and regulations and laws that are thrust on our private citizens. So the best way to do it is just to make sure there's more Republicans there, and those who are wavering or who don't feel the need just have to understand that there's a reason that they have an 11% approval rating in Washington. And that 11% is partially based on the fact that they've exempted themselves from many of the rules and regulations that the rest of the citizens of the United States have to follow.
Andrew?
I don't think anything could be more offensive to us as Americans than to think the people we choose to represent our values could in good conscience exempt themselves from the operation of any law that they impose on us as a citizenry. I, for one, have always viewed the notion of a citizen legislature as being an ideal we should all strive for. And when I go to Washington as your congressperson, I'm going as a fellow citizen. And I certainly can commit to you that never would I engage in a vote which would place me above the law, beneath the law, to the side of the law. I think Congress ought to be in the guts of every law that's passed.
Thank you. Lisa?
Well, I know my two opponents have pledges that they wanted us to sign. And I believe that pledges are for Boy Scouts. We have serious business, this is a serious race, and our country has serious problems. Yes, I do believe Congress should be held to all of the laws that are enacted, and especially the leaders of our country. So although I'll make a pledge to the taxpayers and I'll make a pledge to the voters of our 5th district, but I will not sign any pledges by my opponents at this time.
Thank you. Mark?
Well, thank you. I actually found my pledge in my pocket. It was the third item. And I know I did start this thing, and Mike was kind enough to sign it along with me. They come in 3 parts. You have to have term limits so that folks know they're not going to be there for more than 8 years. You have to have the concept of no pension so that folks know they're not doing it for the wrong reasons. Then you have this exemption. Well, in the end, what you try to do is you try to build consensus with the folks who are down there, the 434 other people. But if that doesn't work, there's another idea. Exempt them from the exemptions. In other words, you have term limits for those folks who are elected after you, so that sometime down the road, everything will be in place. You have this exemption law go into effect for those folks after you, so that sometime down the road, it will be in effect. So you give those folks a break who don't have the guts to vote for it, but eventually you do get what you want.
And
Let me answer the question, I guess Bob's question, who's directed to. The way you get the other members to come along is to demonstrate leadership. And I think the way you do that is on day one when you go down there, you exempt yourself. You don't need a law to do this from the pension. I mean, I've already done that. I pledged to not take a pension. You exempt yourself from any special type of health care or anything like that. You put yourself in the same boat as the rest of the American people. Insider trading, you sign a pledge, and heck, you could even bond it saying you're going to abide by the insider trading rules like everybody else. And if you can get 50, 60, 70 other members of Congress or more to agree with you and to do that, not on the campaign trail, although that's important to do for politics, but when you get to Congress, then I think in that chamber, that large chamber with so many divergent opinions and so many different types of people, you can get an actual bill to the floor and get it passed. But it's going to take leadership, people that are willing to actually take on those responsibilities personally on day one when we get to Congress. And I'll do that as your representative.
Justin, stay right up there. The next question will come to you. Should the top 1% of wage earners pay more in income tax?
The top 1% pay more. I think we need to flatten the system as much as possible when it comes to income tax. I don't think we're going to get to a position where we have a perfectly flat income tax. It's just not realistic in America. We've got folks that are impoverished on one end. They're not going to pay 35% like folks that are going to pay at the top. But we need to flatten it out, not just in the middle, folks that are making money at that 1%, they ought to be paying their fair share of taxes too. I think the real frustration you're seeing here in this debate that the American people are having right now, and it's kind of happening during this Republican presidential debate, is what kind of exemptions we're going to have. Are we going to have a tax code that's that thick, where there are so many loopholes and exemptions that if you have enough good lawyers, you can get off really paying very little in taxes? Or are we going to have as flat a system as possible with as few exemptions as possible? Ones that make sense to us, ones that have become part of our tradition, such as interest on mortgage loans, and a few key exemptions like that. But I think we've got to whittle down that tax code, and when we do that, when we get it that thick instead of that thick, there's going to be a sense of fairness with the system, and you won't have this as such a terrible issue that's out there, because it's not fair right now. And as Republicans, I think we need to be honest with that. We shouldn't deny the reality that we've got people at one end that are paying very little in taxes compared to folks on the other, whatever that end may be. We need to confront that head on, and that should be a key part of our platform for whoever's running for Congress or Senate or President, that we need a flatter system with fewer loopholes, very few loopholes, and a very small tax code, so that ordinary Americans can figure out the tax law without having to go to lawyers. Thank you.
And Mike.
With this, I'm going to use I know my friend Ron is here, we're Giants fans, we talk about the Giants all the time, so I'm going to use a football analogy. Eli Manning makes more money than the reserve tackle on the Giants. Because Eli Manning can do something that the reserve tackle and very few people in America can do. You can thread a pass right down, 40 yards away and win a Super Bowl. And so some of these top 1% wage earners are exceptional people because they bring a skill that other people don't have. They are the superstars of industry, and they create jobs, and they create money for people. And so if you're a job creator, I don't want to tax you more. I want to get you out there, continue to create jobs. The president of UTC makes a considerably more money than I do. But he has created wealth, he has created jobs in this state and across the world. And so again, I do agree we need to flatten our system. We have to get rid of certain things. I was just working on my taxes over the weekend. The alternative minimum tax is a nightmare for many Americans. But to penalize wealth just because they're wealthy, you're taking job creators and you're penalizing them for this great skill set that they bring forward. Again, Louis Chenevier of UTC creates 65,000 jobs, with Otis Elevator. Reward him for that. That's fine. But don't penalize him for it.
Thank you. Andrew.
I think we as Republicans have to be very careful not to fall into the trap that the president and his party are setting for us in terms of framing the debate for November. Class warfare is a very unhealthy thing for our society. It's a very unhealthy thing in political debate. I visited a successful family-owned manufacturing company in my district this week. It's a sub-S corporation, which means all of the profits of the corporation are taxed to the family that owns it. And what they told me in no uncertain terms was that they are unwilling to invest their earnings in additional plant and equipment so that they might create new jobs unless and until they have some peace of mind that the class warfare will come to an end and that they won't be targeted to pay an even greater share. People that do well in this country pay a considerable amount of taxes. I know in the state of Connecticut, we over-rely on high-income earners. Over my objection, we continue to pass the so-called millionaires tax, and time again, the revenues that we project fault we being the institution, not we being me, they fall short. And the reason they fall short is because people have feet and cars and homes in Florida. So we play a game of chicken with successful Connecticut residents and successful Americans. And I think we ought to be very careful before we think that the solution to what ails us is taxing people more.
Thank you, Andy. Lisa?
There's a simple tax principle, that the more you levy something, the less you have of it. So the more you put taxes on a business, the less business is going to have an economic output. But you know, folks, this race really isn't about taxes. It's about spending and cutting spending. Make the hard decisions that we need to make so that our government shrinks in size and spends less money. Spends less money than they make. And that's a fundamental principle of Republicans.
Thank you, Liz. And Mark?
Does anybody know a poor person who has hired somebody, who's expanded a company? I don't. That 1%, which we're asking to contribute more, are the creators of our society. They're the ones who are creating jobs. They're the ones who are the engines of this great country. We have 47% of the folks who pay no income tax. I believe that everybody should pay something at a lower rate. And I believe that if we do that, we'll have more money come in to the system. It worked, actually. It worked when JFK reduced rates. It worked when Ronald Reagan reduced rates. So we do have to simplify. We have to reduce marginal rates. And let's not penalize our 1%, who are the creators. And by the way, Warren Buffett's going on the internet, on TV, saying that people like him should contribute. He could certainly write a check for $10 billion, but he hasn't.
Are you satisfied with the debt limit deal made last summer? And how would you have advocated differently?
That's a great question. I was on a family vacation watching CNN 3 or 4 days during that debate, and it's amazing to me that this government has risen dysfunction to an art level. They've made the last minute the most important minute. And as I was wondering and waiting for that last deal to be made, I knew that the deal was going to be a bad deal. And I knew that this gang of 12, as I call it, would fail in their effort. And fail they did. 435 people could not come to some resolution on the debt reduction, and they expected 12 to. And of course the 12 failed. And I knew it was a lousy deal. And I was very disappointed, by the way, when Alan West voted for that deal and not against that deal. But we had 35 courageous young freshman Republicans that stood their ground and voted against the deal, and they did right to vote against the deal. Now, we were sold on that deal and on the BCA because we wouldn't be losing our credit rating. Do you remember that? Well, what happened within 5-6 days? We were downgraded. We were sold on the deal that interest rates would go through the roof if we didn't make a deal, and Moody's downgraded. Well, what happened to that? Rates went down. So you have to be very, very careful about what government tells you, because in many cases they're trying to sell you something. You've got to be careful. You have to use your intellect to know what's really going on. That was a terrible deal. I would have voted against it in Congress. And I think that what we've seen in the past vindicates that kind of judgment.
I believe the deal didn't do enough to reduce spending. We have a spending problem, obviously. We also have a tax problem. The taxes do need to come down. But we need to bring the spending down also. We need to get economic growth moving. But I think what that debate really showed was that it matters who you send to Congress. It matters what kind of Republican you send to Congress. Because you had some Republicans in the caucus that were fighting for significant reductions that would have put us on a path to a balanced budget sooner than 20 years from now. And you had others that said, well, you know, let's take a step back here. We got an election coming up. We don't want to be seen as too tough on the spenders. And so what we ended up with was essentially no reductions whatsoever. And now we have a budget where the baseline is being jumped up even more, and spending is going to go up, amazing as it sounds. Look at what we've done in our past on this panel, and I think that gives you clues as to what kind of Republicans we're going to be. When I worked in Governor Rell's administration, I returned money at the end of the year. I held back millions of dollars in spending and bond authorizations. Look at what other folks have done, and you can see what they're probably going to do when they get to Washington, when they're in a tough situation, and people are pushing them to keep spending levels up and forget about tax cuts, rather spending cuts. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
One of there's a definite correlation between jobs and debt. And you see that in our businesses when they perceive uncertainty in government policy. They are not going to expand their jobs. They are not going to open factories. They are not going to invest in either this state or this country. Again, I've seen that with my own corporation, United Technologies Corporation, where no one in this room has any idea what our tax policy is going to be in January. Not one of us. But when we talk about jobs, we say, well, let's get companies to invest here. But no company is going to invest here until they get some certainty from Washington as to how they're going to handle the tax situation, the debt situation, and that's when they'll start to think about, reinvesting in America and bringing jobs back here. So this last deal, if you'll call it, in Washington, all it did was create more uncertainty. Again, our last deal was on some of the Social Security tax issues. Let's go for 2 months. Well, business people don't think about 2 months down the road. They think about 2 years, 5 years, 10 years in the capital that they're expending. So again, I would have voted against that legislation. And again, you have to give people the opportunity, business people the opportunity, to give them some certainty so that they know whether it's time to invest in America or in Connecticut, or whether to keep their money and their jobs overseas, because they're just not coming here with this sense of uncertainty that pervades our nation.
Thank you. Andrew?
It's amazing how quickly time passes, and in my own mind I'm kind of going to the replay of where we were. I think it was in August of 2011, but I would certainly stand ready to be corrected as to the particular date when the debt ceiling crisis was before us. Interestingly, Chris Murphy voted no on the bill. Dick Blumenthal voted yes. That was enough to get me to scratch my head. Something funny is going on here. Now, I, for one, didn't like the deal. I don't like the deal, because it was tantamount to kicking the can down the road. And ladies and gentlemen, we have run out of road. But I have to say that in August of 2011, that's when it was, and again, I stand ready to be corrected, I do think the responsible vote at that time was a yes vote. Because the alternative to passing a bad bill was to send the financial markets, not only of this country, but globally, into a turmoil the likes of which we might never have previously experienced. And so I was disappointed that Chris Murphy chose, in my view, to pander to a small segment of his constituency with a no vote, rather than to do the harder thing and vote yes on something that would keep our country from melting down, potentially. So that was how I saw it.
Thank you. Lisa?
Well, I differ from Andrew. I was very clear and strong that I would not have voted to lift the debt ceiling. We still were downgraded. The world didn't end. And, I'm here today because of that huge debt. I just don't believe it's right for our generation to put $15 trillion on the backs of our kids. I don't know how they're going to get out from under it. And so I'm going to stick with, we need a balanced budget. We need to put a plan in action to whittle down our debt. And I grew up in a very, very poor family. My mother was a breadwinner, and she was the caretaker. And she worked 2 jobs to pay down her debts. So it's a core value for me. And no, we need to grab a hold of that debt. We've got to put a plan in action and make sure we do not stop. We've got to check every single accounting and make sure that we get our spending under control. And that means we'll have to have a smaller government, which is what we want anyway. So the ends justify the means. Thank you.
Lisa, stay right up there, please. Real easy one here. How do you plan to beat the Democratic machine in November?
Well, I think that is an easy one. We can beat the Democrats at this. And I believe that we Republicans have a wonderful opportunity in this election. It's an open seat. It's a winnable seat. But we have to show a very clear difference. And I believe this election is setting itself up to be a classic matchup with me as a fiscal conservative, a job creator, and a small government advocate. Businesswoman. We have Chris Donovan. He's a big government. He's a union-hugging. He's a job-killing liberal. It is very clear. And people want a clear distinction when they go to the voting polls. So I believe with your help and that clear distinction, we can certainly take this in November.
The Democratic machine, you become a Republican machine. There's no reason why we can't be as good as they are. Yes, we can become as good as they are, because there's one question that I ask people, and I'll ask you right now. One question. If you had to answer whether you're a conservative or you're a liberal, what would your answer be? And I find that most people in this state, in this blue state, say they're a conservative. They don't have the right to answer in the middle. They're one or the other. And I believe that most people would answer that they're conservative and that they believe in good old-fashioned principles of self-reliance and smaller government. We can beat them. We used to have 3 congressmen out of 6. We used to have a Republican governor for a long time. Reagan won in this state. Bush Sr. won in this state. So we can beat them. We have to go toe-to-toe on our principles, our instincts. We have to organize. We have to get out to vote. We have to bring these people to the polls. Not a good excuse that it's too hot to go to the poll, but that they have something else to do. They have to be engaged. We can win the seat.
We're going to win this seat by giving the voters a positive message about the future of America. It's that simple. We have to show daylight between us and the Democrats. We have to do it with conservative principles. We have to do it with values and principles that average Americans support, like real spending reductions and policies that are going to bring us economic growth. It's not just enough to bash the Democrats, Chris Donovan, whoever that's going to be. These guys are bad. We know that. The voters know that. The voters know the Democratic machine in Hartford has completely failed this state. We're last in everything. Job creation, the high cost of energy, economic growth, debt for the state. But if that's all we run on, they're going to get turned off in a heartbeat. So we've got to give them a positive alternative. That means we've got to talk about economic growth. We've got to talk about getting the country moving forward again. Keep it a positive message. And the conservative message, our conservative principles of free markets, of an all-of-the-above energy policy, of health care reforms that make sense, of supporting seniors, families. These are positive things that the average American, the average Connecticut voter believes in. And I've said this, we're not the majority party in the state. We're the majority principles. And if we put up a candidate who reflects those principles, who truly reflects those principles, and does it in a cheerful, a concise, in a clear way, they're going to come with us because that's leadership. That's what people want. Yeah, sure, we're going to remind them that the Democrats have done a bad job. But if that's only our message, we're going to lose. We've got to show them that there's a much better way. We've got to show them that there's hope, real hope, that prosperity can come and that we can renew America's greatness. Thank you.
Governor's race that we recently run, Tom Foley won this district. So this district is a winnable district with the right candidate. And what I plan to do to win this race is to directly draw a line in the sand and put my record as an elected official up against whoever the Democratic nominee is. And so I'll talk a little bit about my record in Farmington, which I'm very proud of. Again, did we create jobs in Farmington? Absolutely, we've created jobs. I created enterprise zones. We put them in place and we've had job growth in Farmington every year during my 6 years. We've had grand list growth every year during my 6 years. Can the Democratic nominee say the same thing during his tenure or her tenure in Hartford? I don't think so. I paid down the debt by 20% during my 6 years. And I'm very proud to say that 2 years ago, Farmington was upgraded, and I'll repeat that, upgraded in our Moody's bond rating to AAA, something that only 17 other towns and cities in this state have. Again, I'll put that up against Chris Donovan or whoever's going to be the Democratic nominee, and to see how they match up with their bond rating. And then I'll put up my pension plan. That's 95% funded in Farmington versus the state plan. I think Andrew pointed out, I forget the exact number, but it's some horrible number. The state is literally in default because of that. So I'm proud to run, and that's one of the advantages that I bring to the table, where I am an elected official, and I've been re-elected 3 times, and I'll run on that record, and proudly run on that record. It's not going to be just words that I'm putting out there. It's going to be things that I've accomplished during my tenure.
I'll put in a shameless plug, an untimely shameless plug. I was at the Salisbury ski jumps last weekend, and if you've never been, you ought to go. We just rebuilt the ski jump there. It's the only ski jumping facility in southern New England. But when I was there, I was walking back to my car, and I came across a constituent of mine who said, "Andrew, I'm an unaffiliated voter, and I usually vote Democratic." She said, "You're running for Congress, and I'm going to vote for you because I know you care about me." And in politics, it's often said that people wish to know how much you care before they care how much you know. Ladies and gentlemen, the way we win this election in November is by proving to the voters that we, the candidate, care about their future, about their fate, about our collective fate as Americans. If voters don't have faith that you care about what's going on in their lives and that you're going to Washington to make a difference for them, you'll never get elected. I also will say I'm happy to have taken all those years of Spanish I took in college. I wonder what I'd ever do with that. But actually what I've done with it in the legislature is spoken Spanish with many of my legislative colleagues, and they're surprised that the legislator from the hills can speak Spanish quite competently. And I look forward to engaging voters in their native tongue and letting them know that if they elect me to Congress, they'll have someone who speaks Spanish as well as English.
Thank you, Andrew. Andrew, next question. The state legislature has the reputation of being unfriendly to businesses, especially small businesses, including agriculture, unless it is a mom-and-pop operation with a cute little roadside stand. If you go to Congress, what will your position be pertaining to small businesses, and especially agriculture?
Not to embarrass Julia, but here goes nothing. Many of you may know that there was a time when you could go to the Wassermans and harvest your own Christmas tree. And one day, and if I get my facts right, Julia, jump in and correct me, somebody who came to harvest that Christmas tree got injured somehow and thought the right thing to do would be to sue Julia and her husband for opening up their property so that people might derive some pleasure in harvesting Christmas trees. So I worked with Julia to try to pass a bill that said to farmers, if you let people onto your land, you ought to be able to do so free of being held liable in a lawsuit. And I, for one, I'm proud to have been the Connecticut Farm Bureau Legislator of the Year on 3 separate occasions, a hat trick. And the reason that the Farm Bureau has supported me is because I've done my level best to restore agriculture to its rightful place in Connecticut's economic array of opportunities, and I continue to do that. So the question was, what would I do to help the small business? Yeah. I do think that our tort system is a real threat to small businesses in terms of the insurance that all of us are forced to pay. But particularly the agricultural sector needs to have some freedom from the fear of liability.
Thank you. Lisa?
Well, I don't just talk about small business and regulations, I live it every single day. And I'll give you an example. I own a bowling alley. And the bowling alley I bought from a man in his 70s. And you know, here's one guy, and he's trying to market and operate and do his books. And the health and food department comes in, two separate people. The milk person and then the hot guy, the hot food guy. And then the liquor commission comes in. And then there's the lanes inspector that comes in, the payroll tax audit, and the sales tax audit. At the end of the day, this guy doesn't have time to operate his business. So we have many, many, many regulations to roll back in Washington. But you know what? The number one I'd roll back is Obamacare, because it's killing small businesses. It is increasing costs. It is creating so much more paperwork. That's the number one thing that I'd roll back. And then number two, I'd pull back Dodd-Frank, because small businesses can't get loans, because Dodd-Frank is making it much too risky to loan to a small business owner. So those are the two things that I'd roll back, and that would help a lot of my peers in small business today.
Just in the last week, I got a pack of papers from the Department of Revenue Services, which is the business entity tax. Some of you have gotten that. I got a pack this big. I have 70 or 80 entities, like Lisa. And each time I open up the envelope, it's $250, which is really stifling, especially if some businesses are not making money, not doing business. We should abolish the business entity tax, Andrew. Not have it, but let's get rid of it. We have to make this state more friendly. This state is probably number 49 and number 50 in terms of being friendly for business. We have to roll back regulations. We have to make it palatable for folks to go to work at 8 o'clock in the morning and come back at 6 o'clock at night. Make it a pleasurable experience to go to business and not be overwhelmed by all these regulations day in and day out.